Hello and welcome back to another EDH deck design video. This is a re-recording of another video I had previously posted where I have changed around the deck, and I'm also trying to improve the quality of the video as well. This deck is my Gwendlyn Di Corci or Corci. I have no idea how you pronounce it. I've heard everyone say different things deck. I have two EDH decks, this and my Bladewing deck, where someone has given me the General as a gift. And because I'm very sentimental, I have a hard time getting rid of things, I chose to actually make EDH decks with them as the General. So I will always have some kind of Gwendlyn and Bladewing deck. But what those decks do will always greatly differ. Like this particular deck, for example, used to be a bouncy discards deck, where I would just try to mess up your hand and board state as much as possible. Like I would Sunder and then Mind Twist just because I could. This one, doing that, it's really strong, but that can also make for some very unfun games. So I decided to tone it down, and I had more fun with this deck. This is actually a clone deck, and I'm just running her for the callers. Again, I'm always going to run her as the General for something, and this is the current rendition. Gwendlyn is a 4-mana costing legend from Legends that doesn't actually suck. There's like 3 of them. She is red, black, black, blue for a 3/5, so her mana curve to body power ratio is actually pretty good. And her power is to tap and target player discards a card at random. I can only do this at my turn, essentially sorcery speed. Usually when I run generals that have activated abilities, especially like this one, I like capitalizing on it. I like finding ways of doubling it, untapping her, things like that to make her like a hymn to Torque and whatnot. I try to tone that down in this deck because that can actually really mess up your opponent, especially because she can come out pretty quickly. So this is more of a funsy deck. Again, it's actually as fun as I can try to make a deck run. I love blue. I'm a control player at heart, so it hurts me not to run like 15 counterspells. I'm not joking. I like 15 plus counterspells in EDH. But this deck is more of a themey one. So I do have a backup General. Most of my decks, I play multiplayer a lot. I don't choose what General I'm playing, but sometimes I literally just have him face down and have the opponent pick for me. But in particular, I don't actually like Bolas. He's there again because someone gave it to me. He's far too slow in this deck to work. I know he's really good with like some combo tech, like if you're running Scion as your General, or if you have the black-red Shark and Vol Planeswalker, because you can auto discard their hand. But from experience, anytime I see a Bolas deck, most of the time Bolas sits in the command zone and he is never cast, and then the deck does whatever you need it to do for the callers. So he usually just chills out in the background, and I always want her. Anytime I have run Bolas, maybe in like a massive player game, I always kind of wish I had her anyways. So let's start with the keys of the deck. This is a clone deck, so you'd expect to see some clones. Phantasmal Image is the cheapy clone. 2 mana for a clone is great. He fizzles although when you target him. We have the original clone. We have a new clone. He costs 1 more, but you can bounce him back to your hand. We have Shakashima, the more widely known clone because he used to be General Hate. We have the Artifact clone. I can kind of cheapy him out, but yeah, he's just really good. Evil Twin can remove what you clone. Duplicate, or Dax Duplicate, is a new Hasty clone. Vesuvian Shapeshifter is an upkeep clone. And that's it for the physical clones. We do have, of course, blue, so we're running some pretty good tempo and advantage cards. Snapcaster, I'm not always a big fan of, but he does fantastic. Baleful Sticker, although I love, the card advantage on this is great. It just makes people not want to attack you. Burnished Heart is fantastic for draw. This is a 3-color deck. Well, not draw, but ramp. This is a 3-color deck, so he can help us fix our mana problems. So can Sad Robot. Glenalondra is fantastic. She's always been one of my favorites, simply just because it can put a lot of strange situations into an opponent if they aren't playing a lot of creatures. She is a Persisty. I can counter 2 things. Non-creatures, that is. Maul Drifter is another great clone target, because I can just keep drawing more cards. Perplexing Chimera, I've always had fun with this. This is more of a trolley card, especially when you clone it and you get 2 of them out. What he does is whenever an opponent casts a spell, I may exchange control of the spell and the Chimera with that opponent. And then I can actually just reselect targets at the spell targets. So this can get really confusing if I have a clone of him out, and then there's more than one of these on the table and asking for priority and things like that. Just majorly here for fun, but it's always funny as hell. I wouldn't be playing clones if I didn't have a Deadeye. Deadeye is kind of the one that causes grumblies at the table. I don't have any infinite combo with him and Palancron in here, but Deadeye and a clone is fantastic. I'll keep him over here because, of course, we need to talk about him. Consecrated Sphinx, of course, if you're running blue, you like the draw. This is another thing that's really fantastic. Not quite a clone, but he exiles on entry. Phyrexian and Jester and Deadeye can make creatures very hard to stay on the field. Erebos, of course, is not always a creature. In fact, I would prefer him never to become a creature. He is a more expensive greed. Well, the same to cast, but one more to activate. But he also stops opponents from gaining life. I always like, as soon as they print to Erebos, I essentially just put him in place of all the greeds in my deck. Even, I think, when I was trying to tone down some decks, I took a Necropotent out for him just because he's such a fantastic card, and I like indestructible things that are hard to deal with. The deck, that's actually all the creatures. I don't run a lot of things you would think to see in a Deadeye deck. I don't have Palancron in here. I don't like the infinite mana. I don't really have anything to do with the infinite mana because I don't even think I have a Blue Sun Zenith. But that's also such a commonly seen combo, it seems boring to me. I also don't have a Venser in here, so I can't infinitely, or just keep repeatedly bouncing things in your hand. The idea is, of course, that my opponents are going to play their Venser, their Woodfall Primus, their big nasty in the battlefield blah. Then I will clone it, and then I'll Deadeye it. So it's their fault for having the card in their deck. I don't have a very big counterspell package here. I like countering spells because it's really good. I'm the kind of guy who I don't care if it's anything, but if it's card advantage, I will counter it. Like if it's a Crozen or the ramp, the Cultivate, that's a 1 for 2. Essentially, I will counter that because it is not only fixing your mana, but it's a 1 for 2. So that's important to counter. I don't see why a lot of people don't. Hinders for generals, as is Spell Crumple. And Counterflux is to counter whatever. Cryptic Command is, of course, one of the better counters. It's just 4. I like exiling, so Mindbreak Trap has always been a fun of mine. And Rewind is kind of the obvious counterspell because it untaps everything. Then we have the rest of the spells. Cackling Counterpart is our instant speed clone. Of course, it can only be something I have on my side. Ghostly Flicker is also there to help reset a clone. I also have the Sculpting Steel, so it can help reset that as well. Capsize is our groovy bounce. Everyone likes Capsize. No, everyone hates Capsize. Same thing with Cyclonic Rift. You either love it or hate it. I love them both, but it's just hard to deal with if it's on the other side of the table. Croesus Charm does everything I like. I like bouncing, I like destroying, and I like destroying. Shadow of a Doubt is another one of my favorite troll cards. It essentially just goes through and stops people from searching. So it literally could be 2 mana to destroy a land and replace itself if they're going to go crack a fetch land. Mana Short is one of my favorite cards running blue. It's kind of like Silence, where on an opponent's upkeep I can just tap down all the lands before they can do anything past instant speed. Ancestral Vision is good for draw, as is Steam Augury, as is Fact or Fiction. Don't normally run a lot of tutors because in EDH I always feel the singleton format is more about spontaneous and difference. But I like the tutors that are cheap enough to get me what I need the turn to play it. Rise and Fall is a fun card. I'm actually enjoying Fall right now in a modern deck. Both modes on both sides are great. Shame I can't infuse them like the newer ones though. Vandal Blast is great for destroying all those artifacts. Right is, of course, a gigantic value card. All these clones and most of the deck is built on tempo and value. So why have a clone of one thing when I can have 5? Damnation and Decree is our wipes. And the Cruel Ultimatum is the kind of classic Grixis card that's just a great value. Everything on the card is great. 7 mana is kind of expensive, but everything it does is always fantastic. It just kind of sucks when the opponent has more than one creature and you need to deal with one creature, and this is your only answer. But past that, we do have a lot of enchantments. This is a clone-style deck, so I think running Copy Enchantment's funny. It may simply be a dead card in your hand. It could be a Mirari's Wake. It could be anything. Dance of Many is another clone. It is a 2-mana clone with a small upkeep cost. If anything happens to the token or the enchantment, it goes away. I like casting things at instant speed. Stranglehold is great for nerfing an opponent trying to search their deck. Also stops infinite turns, but it's more there to stop their ramp and their tutorage. Some study of the Ristics variety. I like drawing. We have some walkers. I have Lily in here. I used to have the other Lily in here as well, the Veil, but the discard and whatnot, it left when she changed. This one's great for, again, a little bit of tutor and a little bit of advantage. I don't normally like Jace, but I like drawing. This may become an Architect of Thought since I am playing around with other people's creatures. Tameo is actually my favorite blue planeswalker. Lily is always my favorite planeswalker, but Tameo is very close. Everything about her is fantastic. If you ever get to the ultimate, there's no reason you should not be winning unless the board state was just entirely unfavorable. And it wouldn't be a Grixis deck without the Boils himself. Everything on him is great. The mana cost, although, kind of sucks. Then we have lots of artifacts. We have I don't normally run top. If you've ever played MTGO, you know just how obnoxious this can be because it's not intended to be obnoxious, it just takes up time. This can help set up some miracles. I don't have any miracles in the deck, I don't recall. But in a 3-color deck, I do like guaranteeing specific land drops, and it's kind of there to help. I do still have this in the deck. I don't have a lot of activated abilities other than my General and the Planeswalkers. But since the General has an activated ability, this is definitely staying in the deck. It essentially turns into a him. I can pay 2 to activate, or to double an activated ability. Sculpting Steel is another clone effect. This comes in as any kind of artifact I want it to be. Mizzium Transreliquate is kind of the goofy card of the deck. I always put at least one really stupid and thematic and funny card in the deck. This could be a copy of any artifact. It's not as good as Sculpting Steel since I don't get the entry trigger, but I can reset it on its own if need be. And then we have the ramp. We always have the Soul Ring and the Bauble, my favorites of the 1-drops because Soul Ring, but this one will get me a land to fix. My favorite 2-drops are diamonds. I have a preference for the diamonds over any 2-drop. I know the Signets and the Talismans are probably technically better. I've always liked the diamonds since Mirage. It's just a personal preference there. And finally, I do run the Gem of Becoming. This is a card I've always been on the fence about because of the mana cost, but the ability to sacrifice it and get all 3 of my shock lands, it just sounds like a good deal. And finally, the lands. The last little bit of tech that's loitered in the deck since the bounce and untap trick is Minimo, because again, the General can be untapped, and I can make them discard more at once. Having a land do that is just so helpful, I can't not run it. We have 2 creature lands. We got the Creeping Tar Pit and the Lava Claw. Lava Claw is one of my favorite lands. We have an Ancient Tomb for some extra ramp. And I'm playing blue, and I may end up putting Deadeye with the Mull Drifter or the Strix, so I may end up drawing just a massive amount of cards. I don't like tap lands, but being a 3-color deck with a General that has no colorless in her mana cost, this basically makes the cut just because of that. And of course the Command Tower. Then we have all the colorful lands themselves. We have the 3 Buddies, we've got the 3 Filters, we've got the 3 Pains, the 3 Shocks, and the 3 Temples. Temples are worth keeping simply because the Scry is always helpful. And finally, we just have a gigantic pile of basic blah blah blahs. But that is the current rendition of Gwendlyn. I've always enjoyed clone decks. I usually do clones that are like mono blue. I know a better clone version, although, is the other guy from Legends, the Esper control colored guy, who's on your upkeep you can have his power reset. That's actually more on theme for a clone deck, so I would actually suggest him. She's not on theme for the clone deck other than the colors I liked. There are a lot of clone cards that are not in the deck that did not make the cut that I'm always on between about. Quicksilver is a 7/7 clone. Symmetry Puka is a possible clone when something dies. Vesuvian Doppelganger is an older clone. Body Double is a clone of something in a graveyard. Demir Doppelganger is one that can clone when something is being put to a graveyard. And Cryptoplasm is another upkeep clone. This is another enchantment that kind of mills and clones, but that one's just not always a guarantee. But that is Gwendlyn, the current rendition. I'm enjoying the clones. It makes every single game different. I could sit there and clone my own ramp. If I'm going up against control, I can clone whatever the opponent has. It makes every game wildly erratic. I like chaos. I like having fun. I don't like repetition too much. So I may end up keeping it like a clone, because apparently, as you saw, there's 2 brand new clones that just came out recently. But yeah, it's actually pretty fun. I would always suggest running some kind of clone tech just to see how you like it. In EDH, it's always fantastic to have at least 1 or 2 clones in your deck if you can. Per Gwendlyn, although, past the effects you saw, like the double effects, there's no real specific tech that helps with her. She is a rogue, so you could use the gear, the, what is it called, Cloak and Shadow, no, Dagger and Cloaks, or Cloak and Daggers. It auto-equips and gives the rogue Shroud and +2 and 0. So I've seen a few Gwendlyn decks that are more like rogue-based. But most of them are literally just Grixis control decks, because the discard is fantastic, and it's very easy to fit some tech in here that lets you untap her. But yeah, that's Gwendlyn. Stay tuned. I'm going to be reposting the Bladewing deck as well, which has also had some slight changes to it. But till then, if there's any suggestions or any ideas or any comments, let me know. This is being recorded a little bit after M15, so there's probably lots of new cards coming out that will fit this deck better. Thanks.